Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
My freshman year of college was one of the funnest years of my life. And some of my fondest memories are from that year. But it was also the scariest and strangest year to date. This is thanks to one story in particular that takes place over the entire school year. There are actually a couple more that I might post some other time. I'm 31 years old now, and I still sometimes wonder how this really happened, and I didn't end up as a shut-in nut job, and it still freaks me out to this day. I've only talked about it once or twice since it happened 13 years ago, and I'm changing the names of people and places. August 2001. Like most freshmen, I live in the dorms at a state party school. I opted out of the good school that I got into. I guess I had a little steam to blow off after graduating from a military/college prep boarding school. Plus, after a sports injury I got, I didn't exactly have any specific plan for life that went past Saturday night, if you know what I mean. A good buddy from military school, we'll call him Bill, went to the same college as me and lived a few floors below in the same dorm. So, of course, we were getting the party started before my parents' exhaust fumes had even evaporated from the parking lot. For the most part, the first month or so of college was pretty much like that, normal. I went to most of my classes, I partied just about every night, I chased girls around, and that was enough for the moment. But things began to change one night sometime in mid-September, and college for me would never be normal again. My dorm phone rings in the middle of the night. Hello, on the other end, and I can only really describe the voice as the kind you picture when you think about a computer talking, kinda like the early model of car GPS. For the story, I'll call myself Gary. Hi Gary, how are you today? Not fully awake, I'm just so confused at this point. Who is this? And he repeats, Hi Gary, how are you today? It becomes clear that I'm being fucked with, so I hang up and chuckle. I thought, fucking Bill, nice one. And then I pass back out. I end up forgetting about the call for a few days, and I never mentioned to Bill or anyone else. About a week later, I get another call around the same time of night. Hi Gary, I'm watching you. Nice, very cliche, so I said, Seriously, Bill? How are you not knee-deep in Everclear or a Tri-Delt at this hour? Enough already. Cade, my roommate, is going to start getting pissed, you know? And then I hang up. I casually confront my oh-so-clever amigo at breakfast the next morning, purposely not trying to bite too hard to give him a payoff that might incentivize continued calls. But I also wasn't 100% that it was actually him and not another one of my douchebag friends. He gives a genuinely confused response. Well, whatever. So, a couple of days after the second call, I come home and I see that I had multiple messages on my answering machine. What the hell? I barely knew the thing even worked. It's the computer voice guy. Message 1. My machine cuts off first 1 to 2 seconds of the message, which tells me it's a bot set to play a message upon answer. It says, Hi Gary, I'm watching you. Message 2. I thought I asked you to answer my calls, Gary. Message 3. Where might Gary be on a Tuesday night? Okay, so one of my friends is clearly an asshole or bored enough to really push for a reaction here. The next day, I played the messages for Cade, who was around during the calls, which were apparently earlier in the night when he was still awake. He'd been a close buddy since we were in junior high, but we'd sort of taken separate paths after high school. So, anyway, he's aware that I'm a wild child and thinks nothing of the first couple of messages. But by the third, he's a little spooked. I then walked down to a couple of other buddies' rooms and casually but immediately bring up the subject. Nada. Over the next couple of days, I press all close and semi-close friends, but I get 0 answers and 0 suspects. The calls started coming more frequently over the next couple of months, starting at once a week, then to once every 2 to 3 days, up to every single day by Christmas break. I don't say anything to my family at that point, although I really should have. What started out as a decent beginning of college turned into not showing up for any classes, tests, nothing. Grades reflect, and I am too busy answering for a 0.67 GPA to talk about some dumb prank that would likely be dismissed as a pathetic attempt at grades explanation. And so it goes. Uneventful break, and then back to school determined to become a new man. I gotta get my shit together with these grades, so I'm gonna tell Bill that I'm going to have to chill out and focus on school. The first night back, I get my first spring semester call from the computer voice guy. It says, "How is your family in Cyprus?" Which is my hometown suburb. Okay, now this is freaking bullshit, man. What kind of douche lords am I hanging out with that even have the discipline to drag out a prank this long? I get the answer to that question a few days later, and the answer is none of them. The calls become threatening and downright dark. One said, "I'm very interested, Gary, in being close to you." Yeah, with that kind of weird sentence structure like that. "I have tools I can bring. It is going to be all over soon." One day, I bring Bill and all my other buddies up to hear the messages. I never deleted a single one for some reason. I guess when things happen over longer periods of time, you don't really feel the cumulative impact until laying out the complete package of evidence. The guys are in shock. I guess that I should mention that some of these calls got really specific in making sure to note specific details about my parents' address as well as the violence that they are planning on doing to me. Cut open your esophagus, Gary, with a butter knife. And all sorts of other crap that is sort of blurred together through the hundreds upon hundreds of calls that I got over the school year. A chick friend of mine that I really liked in high school goes to a different school hundreds of miles away. Let's call her Layla. We've reconnected thanks to the good old AIM, and we talk from time to time on the phone. Computer voice guy had mentioned a couple of times, "your friend," and made threats about this unspecified person from time to time. But your friend turned into your friend Layla. Layla and I are the only 2 people ever named in these calls, but it did get me wondering if this was a new lead to the source, and Layla is clueless when I call her about it. I know that background was long to read, but you'll understand why I had to explain the situation when I tell you about what happens next. One night, we were all partying and drinking at some hotel. A different buddy of mine, Carl, has a nice big truck and we'd all go everywhere in. But he had passed out drunk at the hotel after pounding an entire bottle of whatever the hell it was. I'm not really drinking tonight, and I want to get back to my own bed. So I snatched Carl's keys to drive back to campus, thinking that I'll drive back in the morning to get everyone. This was one of the few times that I've even driven that year, so I wasn't tip-top on my directions. I make an early turn, and I'm somehow down a road that I have never seen before. I realized this pretty quick, but I figured that I've got the general direction of campus peg, so I can just continue the wrong road until hitting the familiar highway that I knew that I'd eventually have to hit that is close to campus. I'm finding myself in open fields, paved road and everything, but aside from the road, there was absolutely nothing, and it was completely black. It was around 3 a.m. at this time. There's this really strange four-way stop that I come upon. Strange because I'm probably the fourth person in a year to drive on that road. Anyway, I just trudge along and eventually get to the familiar highway, and I'm home free. A few days later, Computer Voice Guy interrupts his usual depraved threatening to mention that specific four-way, the day and the time that I was on it, which, like I said, was around 3 a.m. and there wasn't a soul in sight. So yeah, I now realize that Computer Voice Guy is obviously tracking my movement somehow. Note that I later joined the military and I worked in the intelligence community and worked special operations and tracked bad guys all around the world. But to this day, I still can't figure out how this dude knew that I was in the middle of those fields on that date in the middle of the night. And I never mentioned it to anyone. At around March, this apparent rendezvous became Computer Voice Guy's focal point, and he made sure to let me know the day way close. The calls were coming in no fewer than 10 or 15 every single day. Seriously, the ringer was now off out of courtesy to Cade, and I turned down the volume of the answering machine as his phone calls recorded. But I finally get the message that I've been waiting for. Keep in mind, I've now become somewhat famous at this university by now because of Computer Voice Guy. People were constantly knocking on my door wanting to hear the messages. Friend of a friend of whomever that I know. It was all people wanted to hear about at parties. Blah, blah, blah. For a split second, it was cool because I'm pretty sure that I ended up getting laid a couple of times indirectly from introductions conceived through the interest in the guy with the stalker. Don't judge me. Moving right along, the day, time, location are set. Computer Voice Guy says, "We will meet in front of Coleman Hall at midnight, Wednesday, 27 April, and we will take our friendship to the next level." I know what you're thinking, and yeah, throughout the year, I had considered the possibility that I was dealing with a female. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and I was definitely that kind of dude when I was 18 to 19 years old. The kind that could attract clinginess and anger. But I started to rule out female for various reasons that only a fellow ENFJ would understand. I can build profiles with a very high ratio of accuracy to available information. This creep just didn't feel like a female to me. It didn't even feel like a peer. I was convinced that I was dealing with a mid-30s white male computer nerd that I'd come into contact with at some point in my life. Doesn't really matter because what I ended up finding out on Wednesday, 27 of April, which, by the way, was Layla's birthday, I found out that I was wrong. Of course, everyone wants to be part of this juicy story, and there's a pretty ridiculous amount of testosterone floating around the dorm on game day. This was a real-life creepster and a legit horror story unfolding before their very eyes. And groupthink will subvert caution if properly motivated. These guys are ready to defend me with their lives, just ask them. So while these monkeys are getting all hopped up on Mountain Dew, I stay home that afternoon wondering what the hell I was going to do at midnight. Of course, I was going to go. But dude, yeah, I've always been an athlete in good shape. Wrestling, football, baseball teams, yada yada. But I'm still a 19-year-old white male, good parents, and grew up middle upper class white suburbia and had a good life. In other words, I can definitely hold my own in a street fight. But this, whatever this is, doesn't feel like anything like a street fight or any other kind of fight that I'd been in. This is a disturbed, violent, angry, possibly grown-ass psychopath that has decided to dedicate almost a full year now of his life to targeting and terrorizing me. So yeah, I'm a little frigging nervous. My home team crowd steadily built up throughout the afternoon and evening, with probably close to 70 or 80 guys grouped up at our dorm's common area. We were connected to the female dorm at the first floor. We were smoking cigarettes and talking about beating the shit out of people and getting fucked up and all the other generic cliche that you can imagine. And once the party hour approaches though, over half of the guys splinter off into other various propositions that probably included more traditional fun like beer bongs and sorority girls. So, I'm left with about a 15 to 20 member platoon. I decided earlier that I was not going to allow these knuckleheads to shadow me, but I could definitely use them in case of an emergency. I didn't want to risk him spooking out of the meat, so I let them know that they will need to stay inside the doors of the common area while I walk out to the meeting spot. Coleman Hall was adjacent to our connected girls' dorm, and about 300 paces outside door to get to Coleman. Well, the witching hour came, so I leave the crew to begin the longest couple hundred or so paces of my life. My boys can see me through the glass doors, but wouldn't really be able to see much once I get to Coleman Hall door. About 100 paces out from my spot, I observe two things at the same time. One, some kind of small quick movement in front of the patio walkway that goes all the way around the building. And two, the movement was in a spot along the walkway where the only normally uber bright bulb is out. I'm not exactly sure how I was able to see him, but I suddenly realize that someone is crouched behind one of the cookie cutter bushes outside of the patio perimeter against one of the building pillars. In dark clothes and a hoodie, he is a few feet off from the path where I'm supposed to meet him and positioned to where I really should not have been able to see him, given the pillar blocking any shadow plus the burnt out light, which I later found out smashed. In fact, I could have easily walked all the way to the door without ever have noticed someone down there. Nope. I sort of jump mid-step as this happens, and I see him rise up a little thinking that I might have seen him. I see him rise up and take a step toward me, and fight or flight hits. I've learned that my particular fight or flight chooses fight in more mild situations, and flight during intense situations. But for shit-your-pants situations, it's scarier to run away with your back to whatever scary shit that I'm dealing with. So I fight. And before I realize what I'm doing, I'm in a dead sprint toward this motherfucker, who, I'm guessing, sees what I can't yet, which is my platoon busting through the glass doors in hot pursuit. The creepster nopes the fuck out of there, running on the patio alongside Coleman Hall toward the parking lot. I can tell that this isn't the mid-30s computer nerd that I predicted. Creepster is above average height, above average broad, and built athletically. That's all that I could tell, really. I'm not even sure if he was white, because he was at least tan, if not Hispanic, Middle Eastern, and etc. I'm really booking it as he turns on a dime at the edge of the building. I realize that I'm moving fast enough to catch him, but everyone else is really far behind. I also realize that I'm moving so fast that I won't be protected as I turn a hard right at the corner of the building. If he stops there, I'm toast. And as I turn the corner, I see the van sitting alone in the parking lot in front of me. It's running, and brake lights flicker on then off, park into drive, and begins inching forward toward the exit. Homeslice is of course heading for the van, which for some reason sent this whole new level of fear into me. This is it. This is really happening, and I'm going to get freaking murdered tonight. But I can't stop. Something keeps me moving forward. I guess that I'd come this far, dealt with this crazy bullshit for almost a full year now, completely unable to do anything other than try to ignore it. I'm not exactly going places academically at this point, and my life doesn't quite have all that much purpose to it yet. If I am going to get schwacked, I will at least know, and this crap will at least be over. Plus, I still have a chance to catch this madman before he gets away. If I could just get close enough to dive tackle, I would still be on my own to deal with the creepster, his driver. And now I realize that there's a third one that was manning the sliding side door. Awesome. Just awesome. I don't care how badass you think you are when you're a 19-year-old jock. Your chances of taking down 3 grown men that are already violent criminals and prepared to victimize are about 1 in a not gonna fucking happen, buddy. My turn is wide and slow due to being full-on sprint, and I lose ground. I'm probably 20 yards from the lot when he does a flying leap into the side of the van. There couldn't have been any rows of seats for a leap like that. And creepster number 3 slams sliding doors shut as the van peels out of the parking lot, bangs a right, and then is gone in an instant. The relief of not being kidnapped, bound, and gagged in that van with 3 psychos who almost likely had some pretty horrific plans for me is now just as strong as the dread of the fact that this is still not over with. I am speechless, and so is my platoon as they catch up a minute later. A few of them caught up enough to witness the parking lot scene, but no one was talking. Testosterone has now been replaced with genuine and earnest concern. They all just stood there with me, catching their breath and making sure that I was all right. One guy asked if anyone got a plate number. Not even I did. There was not enough light. We finally start walking back, and I'm reliving the scene as we retrace our steps. As we get closer to the original meeting spot, I see something that scares me more than anything else in the entire equation has up to this point. On the opposite side of the pillar, where Creepy McCreeperson was crouching, there's a video camera sitting on a stand pointed right at the spot that I would have been standing at when I should have not been able to notice him. And it's still recording. I always saw Marilyn walking 3 huge dogs in the park. She was a little 5-foot woman walking these giant Bernese mountain dogs and handling it with ease. I was in love, even though I didn't know a single thing about her. I worked up the courage to talk to her. She was nice but hesitant. She seemed like an exceptionally weary person. I was patient and I earned her trust. I slowly discovered that she was everything that I had built her up to be in my head and then some. We dated for months without her ever inviting me to her place. She always said she lived at the edge of town and hated it, but it was odd and unnerving. I spent a lot of my time wondering what the issue was. Was she married? Or a hoarder? We were 6 months in, and I had too many drinks when I confronted her on never inviting me over. I wasn't taking no for an answer. She had to bring me over, or I was breaking up with her. Marilyn brought me home, and she wasn't married, she wasn't a hoarder. She did live on the other edge of town in a little house filled with her giant dogs. Nothing was out of the ordinary. Well, things didn't stay that way. Marilyn's dogs behaved strangely. They would start barking or growling at random spots and corners of the house as if there was an intruder. This also got worse in the middle of the night. The dogs constantly got up at around 3 a.m., barking and going crazy and sniffing all around the room while we slept. I think I knew what scent they were picking up on. It was a male scent. Musty cigarettes, sweat, and the sting of men's deodorant trying to cover it all up. It was so strong, and I was getting ready to confront Marilyn on it. Did she have a man who was staying there when I wasn't there? The power of the smell was undeniable, as was a strong presence of someone else in the house. I asked Marilyn about it. She was very matter of fact. She was haunted by a male spirit. It always lingered. She didn't think it was dangerous, but it was scary. And it wasn't the house, it was her. It had been with her for a couple of years now in different locations. She asked if it was a deal breaker. No, I was all in. I loved her. I could deal with ghosts. I could deal with feeling like I was always being watched. And I could deal with never feeling alone. I wasn't prepared to deal with what the actual reality was, though. We spent some time at Marilyn's place. Those supernatural oddities always lingered. She explained that she got the 3 giant dogs to protect her from whatever it was. Everything had become kind of a second nature to me, until one day, when we walked into the house and Marilyn peeped right back out the living room blinds. I keep seeing the same middle-aged woman wherever I go, Marilyn whispered. I had no idea at that time that that sentence was the opening line to a horror movie that the two of us were about to live. She's plain, always wearing a hat, sunglasses, super small, and always driving a white car, a Honda. Marilyn went on. I knew the car. I had seen it several times in the past few months. I also could picture a woman, hat, sunglasses, and small. She always seemed to be around like an extra in a movie about my life. It was my time to admit something to Marilyn. I had a stalker, and apparently, she was back. I dated a girl named Savannah for nearly a year in my early 20s. She came off as just sweet at first, obsessed with me in the right way, but then it became the wrong way. I'll spare too much detail, but at one point, I found out that she was secretly recording almost everything that we did in her apartment, and she collected random things of mine, like loose hairs, keeping socks and underwear, even nail clippings. She also seemed to be developing an inability to be away from me for any period of time. She was showing up at my office every day, making me go to long lunches. A couple of times, I was just running errands and I thought that she was following me in her car. It was too much. We had only been together for a few months. I broke it off. Savannah didn't take it well. She kept calling and then texting me nonstop. She kept showing up at my office, my house, and she wouldn't take no for an answer. I eventually threatened a restraining order and pressing charges. She was in medical school and wanted to become a doctor. She knew that that kind of thing could really affect her career, so she finally relented. I remained connected to Savannah on social media. It appeared she moved to another state and got a boyfriend and eventually married, and I mostly forgot about her. She was definitely the middle-aged woman who was following us though. Her build, the way she moved, it was all her. I just had never thought that it was possible. She was also clearly trying to make herself look older and more plain than she really was. A distant friend of mine that I hadn't talked to in years was still connected to her through his girlfriend. I hit him up to see if he knew what the deal was. My friend provided anything but comforting information about Savannah. She hadn't moved out of state, she wasn't married, she didn't have any kids, and as far as he knew, she still lived in the area with her parents. She had dropped out of med school and was a recluse. He also didn't think that she had social media. So I did some investigating. The social media accounts of Savannah's that I was still connected to were flimsy. Barely any friends or followers or content. I did some research of people that I knew that she was actually related to, and it looked like the man in her life was actually her sister's husbands and the kids, her niece and her nephew. She may have been maintaining them just to throw me off. It also started to click with me that I had seen that white car a lot even before I was with Marilyn. I had also seen a plain middle-aged woman with long black hair that I now thought looked like a wig, always wearing a ton of clothes even in the summer. I just never thought to think anything of it. I was sure Savannah had probably been stalking me all along. It probably never stopped. She was just turning up the heat since she saw me getting serious with Marilyn, feeling her grip slip away. I was going to follow through with a restraining order this time and pursue pushing Savannah away for the full extent of the law. The only problem was, I had to prove that it was her and she was doing it. Restraining orders are a lot harder to set up than you might think. I was always on the lookout for Savannah with my hand in my pocket, ready to whip out my phone to take a photo or a video. But it was like she knew, and I never saw her or her white car again. The only problem was the haunting and the agitation of Marilyn's dogs in her house got more and more intense. It seemed to be all hours of the day now and more jarring. The dogs getting full-on angry, and the presence in her house slamming and locking doors. It got so intense that we started setting up cameras around the house to try and capture something. It didn't work until one of them fell behind the couch and accidentally got aimed in the backyard for a day and night. The first video alert hit me during the day while I was at work. A neighborhood kid walked through the yard. Well, nothing sinister. It was so harmless that I didn't even remember to move the camera when I got home. The next time I woke up to a ring notification in the middle of the night, I checked the camera and I saw the neighborhood kid again, in the backyard again, but this time moving towards the back door. I was no longer just writing this off as an innocent neighborhood teenage boys will be boys moment. I shot out of bed, ran out of the bedroom, and I took to the living room flanked by all 3 dogs. I was startled by what waited for me inside the living room, not outside. A tall, young man faced the doorway, the image of his broad back, cloaked in a t-shirt flashing before my eyes for a second. before he was gone. The dogs weren't bothered by the flash of a presence of the man. They ran right for the door and kept erupting with barking. And then I checked the Ring app. I saw the kid walking out to the backyard and disappearing into the darkness. I breathed a sigh of relief and I tried to calm the dogs down. Then I heard Marilyn scream from the bedroom. I rushed to the bedroom and I found Marilyn standing next to the bed and looking over at the window in horror. It was the middle of summer and we were fighting the heat sleeping with the windows open. I could visibly see the screen had been cut and the blinds in front of the window were swaying on a windless night. Someone tried to grab me," Marilyn whispered to me, staring at the darkness of the window. A thought came over at that moment, just before I started to comfort Marilyn. I wasn't so sure. It was a neighborhood boy who terrorized us that night. The size, the movements on the Ring camera, it all added up to Savannah, but dressed as a teenage boy. I took the footage to the police and tried to get that restraining order on Savannah, and they said that it couldn't be proved that it was her in the videos. It was a failure, but it didn't matter because it all stopped. The appearances of Savannah and the haunting. Marilyn and I and the dogs were finally able to rest easy. We settled into life at her house, and we made it a year with everything going perfectly, and we fell full into love. I proposed, she said yes, and I moved into her place, and we slept with her giant dogs every night, safe and happy. The haunting started to pick up again. It was intense. We would be lying in bed and hear someone walking out in the hallway, or we would be in the bathroom and suddenly see a man standing behind us in the mirror. I had to learn to live with it though. I loved her, and it was just what it was. I just hoped that it would get better. Something else unfortunate started to happen after the haunting got bad for a while though. Savannah was back. It took a while to see it because she was changing vehicles so much and changing her looks. She had gained a ton of weight and wore shoes which made her look taller. We went back to the process of trying to capture her in photos and videos, but again, she seemed to know when we were onto her and then disappeared. And there was another calm for a few weeks. It didn't feel the way the one did before though. It felt more like the eye of a storm. And it came at night again. A haunting. Marilyn and I were asleep in the middle of the night. All of the lights and electronics in our bedroom flashed on, and we woke right up. I saw the split-second image of a silhouette of a man by the bedroom door. It was such second nature to me at this point that I didn't even bat an eye. It was different this time though. The image of the man lingered, and I finally really got a good look at him. He was young, probably around 20, dark hair, dark features, tall, thin, and a little rugged. I heard Marilyn whimper, and I looked over to her. She was crying as she looked at the young man. Then, my attention was drawn to the door as it opened slowly. I held my breath, and I saw a shadow step just inside the room. I saw the sight of a gun emerge from around the corner, and I froze like a deer in the headlights. Whoever was aiming that gun at Marilyn and I had a wide open shot. I could sense they were about to pull the trigger, so I closed my eyes. In that little moment of darkness, I heard a scuffle break out. I opened my eyes, and I saw the male figure wrestling in the doorway with whoever had the gun, and the male figure was winning, forcing them out of the room. I don't know what came over me, but I rushed in that direction, leaving Marilyn and the dog still frozen behind me. I was out in the hallway and watching the person with the gun get chased out of the house. I followed them into the living room where I saw a window broken out. For another time, I was able to recognize who was terrorizing us. I could see her small, frail frame trying to fight off this powerful spirit of a young man. There was no denying it. It was Savannah with a gun. I saw Savannah on the ground, trying to fight off the spirit and struggling. For a second, I kind of felt sorry for her. Down there on the ground, tiny and hurt and insane. I doubt stalking us and getting pummeled by a ghost was what she had always wanted in life. She was simply sick. Those thoughts were running through my head when I watched Savannah slip away from the spirit and rush out the window. I had a feeling that I was never going to actually see her again this time. But I also had a feeling about that with the spirit of the young man as well. I looked at his back as I heard Savannah run away into the night out the broken window. The spirit of the young man turned to me for a brief second, and I saw a sense of relief on his face for a moment. I felt someone approach me from behind. I was startled at first and turned around to see Marilyn and the dogs walking into the living room. The spirit of the young man finally turned around, and I watched him meet Marilyn's gaze. The two of them held eyes for a very long time. Everyone silent. Tears gushed out of Marilyn's eyes now. I watched the spirit of the young man nod to her. I watched and heard Marilyn start to break down. And I looked over again, and the spirit of the young man was gone. Then, I went to comfort Marilyn. I had connected some dots before Marilyn even started mapping them out to me. The spirit which had been hovering around us and haunting us was of her older brother, Casey. Casey died in a snowboarding accident years before, shattering Marilyn's young life. Her brother had been her hero and protector, and he was gone suddenly when she was in her vulnerable teenage years. Casey had always told Marilyn that he would always be there for her. She thought he was actually ramping up his presence and haunting when he knew that Savannah was hovering and coming for us. Casey pushing himself back into our world to protect her. The whole thing actually made Marilyn feel good. It gave her some sort of comfort and resolution with Casey. What happened with Savannah was not comforting. We had a ton of video evidence of her, and the police were finally okay with moving forward with several charges. One problem was, the police couldn't find Savannah. She had moved out of her parents' house weeks before, and no one had any contact with her. Marilyn and I weren't as scared as we could have been though. We had a feeling someone would protect us.
And here's the riddle for this video.
Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I would also like to give some extra love to my Patreon members, my channel members, and also my tippers. Thank you so much. If you would like to extend a little bit more support for the channel, don't forget to leave a like and a comment down below. If you would like to become a Patreon member, a channel member, a tipper, or even to buy merch, check out the links in the description below. Again, thank you. And I hope you stay scared, because your fear feeds me.